Hey, hockey fans, T-Boz is 13-3 here with another top-shelf guest, Minnesota native, noted Olympic and NHL exercise physiologist, Jack Blatherwick. This episode is sponsored by Computer Recovery Associates, Dooley's Pub, Kelly Heating and Electric, and Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, Mogi.
I just want to thank Andy Brink and Dave Snuggerud at Breakaway Academy for providing us room to speak with Coach Blatherwick here. This is going to be a great episode, folks. We're so excited to hear about Jack Blatherwick and his overspeed concept of training hockey players. We're excited to have you, Jack. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You know, we should give a quick shout out to a good friend of ours, Johnny Sleep, who gave us a donation to keep this podcast going. And in Johnny's honor, we got one of the best episodes coming in his name right here as well, Moog.
Yep, you guys are going to like this one.
All right, what do you got, Moog?
Well, Jack, let's start with the fact that you're a noted exercise physiologist. You earned your PhD in exercise physiology from the University of Minnesota. Where did your interest in this field originate?
My interest started 60 years ago, really, when I started coaching, because there was no information about how to train young athletes, which I did at the time. I was a hockey coach and a football coach. There was no information available about how they should train. So after teaching and coaching for 9 years, I decided to go back to graduate school and learn. When I told the head of the department, this was the Department of Physiology in the medical school, what my interest was, exercise physiology. At that time in history, there were no people who took exercise physiology to the point of doing something with it. It was all research physiologists. So he said, well, I don't think there's much of a place, much of a way to get a job in this field. And I said, I don't care. I just want information. I'll figure it out after that. So that's how and why I did it in the medical school, physiology, because in the kinesiology department, there's too many courses that didn't pertain to what I wanted to learn.
So basically, you're going into uncharted territory here.
Totally uncharted.
Yeah.
There were almost no fitness gurus around the country. In California, I mean, it was unheard of to use physiology, science, basically, to train people, adults or kids. Nobody did it.
So you broke ground, and your doctoral dissertation was on teaching speed through off-ice training. How did you develop that study, and have you been able to carry out that research?
That wasn't the exact title, but it was pretty much about that topic, because as I started testing, I was at the university, a typical PhD student. I went to Herb Brookls, who I had known from playing hockey in a men's league, and I was lucky enough that he was very interested in science and would allowed me to use the university team kind of as a guinea pig to find good ways to test on ice. I wanted to find, when you test, it has to be pretty standardized. So you can't test the game of hockey. There's too many random decisions to make the test the same for player A as player B. They're all going to do different things at all times in the game. And so I decided the one thing we can standardize is skating. So we had 3 tests for skating: a straight ahead acceleration test, a test of top speed where they accelerated to high speed going down one side, around the corner, and then we tested them only in the neutral zone after they had reached top speed. And then a third test was around 2 corners in one zone and then up to the blue line. So basically testing acceleration, top speed, and agility.
So what's the theory behind this type of overspeed training? What were you trying to figure out here with this?
What we found as I started the test, I tested the Gophers, I tested the North Stars hockey team, pro team, and I tested some high school teams, all within a month, once we figured out good tests that were repeatable with the University of Minnesota team. Again, Herb let me come several times, interrupt practice, and do and find good repeatable tests. Repeatable meaning that player A would get the same result if we tested him a month later that he got before. So any good test needs to be repeatable, and secondly, needs to be a viable test, meaning it gives you the answer to the question you're trying to ask about skating. You know, are the better players faster skaters, or are the better teams faster skaters? So as we tested all these other teams, high school, college, and one NHL team at that time, we found that at every age, the team that was at a higher designated level of play, that is, like A Bantam team is faster than a B Bantam team, or a national Bantam camp, the elite players are faster than an A Bantam team. At every level, at every age, this was true. That even that first year, we tested the University of Minnesota, which won the national championship Division I, and I tested another team that won the national championship Division III, and the Division I team faster than the Division III team. Both of them faster than average teams in the same. I can't say a lot of teams, but I tested one other Division I college team and two other Division III college teams. And the national champion was faster than the ones who didn't win the national championship. Highly unusual tests in physiology to find a difference that consistent between the levels of designated levels of play. Highly unusual. If we tested any other physiological thing, are they stronger? Are they more flexible? Do they have greater endurance? None of those would show any difference at all between a Division I college team and a Division III college team at that time. So from that initial start, it was apparent to me that one of the most important things that we needed to train for was speed. As a coach for hockey, I certainly know that many other things are more important. Rink sense, skills in small areas, so stick skills, and especially rink sense and competitiveness are more important than skating. But without skating fast, you can't make it to a higher level of hockey. So that's why I got interested in just that one aspect of hockey, that is, how do we learn to skate faster on ice and off ice? So the summer before the 1980 Olympics, I had met with Herb several times, but one time, as we're working on his deck, he kept repeating that when, as a player, in the 3 years that he had played against the Soviets, he said the pace is unbelievably fast, and it's uncomfortably fast the entire game. It's not just that they're in better shape in the third period. Everybody talks about the third period being such a difference, but it's the first shift, and every shift after that, you're never comfortable because the pace is too fast. I said, well, do they skate that much better? He says, I don't think they skate much better. It's that they move the puck so fast that you can't skate to keep up with the game. So you're uncomfortable the whole time. Then when we got done that day working on the deck, we sat down and he asked the question, how are we going to train in the next 7 months so that we are not uncomfortable playing against them? He said, Cardiac, we're never going to match their team skill. They've played together too long. We can't match that. Their experience, all of that. But he said, I don't want us to be uncomfortable at the pace of the game at any time during the game. How are we going to train for that? And I said, Herb, you can't train this team the same way you have trained the University of Minnesota. He had just been there 7 years, won 3 national championships, the first 3 that the University of Minnesota ever won. And he looked at me like I'm crazy. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I have a video that I took. In those days, you couldn't do it with your phone. So I had gone to one of his practices with the Gopher team on a Monday when he did these notorious, extremely long stops and starts forever and ever, so that after the first one, everybody's skating slow. They're skating with terrible technique, bent over at the waist, overuse of their arms because their legs were too tired to do anything. So in other words, for the first time through the first stop and start drill, after that, they're teaching slowness and improper, inefficient skating technique. So I showed him the video and I asked, what are you trying to accomplish here? And, he wanted to use some scientific words because he knew I was into science, which is the mistake that we have made for a century in hockey, to try and use words like aerobic and anaerobic to explain what we mean by endurance, when it would be simple to just say endurance for hockey means that we play just as fast at the end of the game as we do at the beginning of the game. If they would have asked hockey coaches, and hockey coaches weren't intimidated into using these Greek terms for endurance, we would have known the right way to train for endurance in hockey long ago. But that didn't happen. And so we're stuck with the fact that everybody thinks the game is either aerobic or anaerobic. And the truth is it's both. So forget it. It doesn't matter if we call it aerobic or anaerobic. Just ask yourself, how do you train so that you're just as fast at the end of the game as at the beginning of the game? Just as skillful at the end as at the beginning. How do you train for that? And of course, that would be intervals. So I said, this is the way we're going to have to train, because you're telling me that the game is never comfortable the pace is never comfortable when you're playing the Soviets. Yet we're going to have a tryout camp in July where we're going to pick what you think are the top 80 college players in the country. And you're going to have your choice along with the other coaches in your committee. You have your choice of those 80 to pick the top 20 players. So let's just say it's the top 20 college players in the country. We know that they're going to be comfortable at the pace of any college game. They're the best. But you're telling me they're not going to be comfortable when they play the Soviets unless we train properly. So I call it overspeed training that we have to do in practices to get ready for the end of the season when the pace is going to be faster. It is in every situation. Everybody wants to play faster in the playoffs than regular season. But nobody trains overspeed to be ready to be comfortable at the pace of the playoff games. So what happens in the playoffs is the defensive players, the second, third, and fourth line, who have played as hard as they can all season long, they help deny the top players their normal comfort zone. They can't play in their normal comfort zone. They normally control the pace of play during the regular season. But in the playoffs, the defensive players dictate the pace, and they do because they're comfortable playing at that pace. Well, back then, it was kind of unheard of. But if you think about what happens in most practices, when the coach says, this flow drill is 3-on-2, you're going to go down as fast as you can, and you're making decisions and whatever, and then you come back as fast as you can, and we'll go down again as fast as you can. But as fast as you can isn't it uncomfortably fast, because it's going to be as fast as the other two guys on your line allow you to play, because their passes may or may not come in time, and they may or may not be perfect passes. So what we call fast in a regular practice really isn't as fast as you can go. Overspeed means you're going to go down at a pace faster than you've ever done it before, and regardless of what happens with a puck, you have to finish the drill as fast as you can possibly go. So to get ready for the Soviets, the pace of every practice has to be uncomfortably fast. You've got to push them in every drill they do. You can't just rely on the fact that you say, do it fast. You've got to make them do it fast. And he was a master at that. His point is, you can't do that from the standing by the boards. You can't just give them the drill and say, do it fast. You've got to be out there on the ice. If it's a flow drill, you're right behind the forwards, and you make them, with whatever you're saying, you make them continue as fast as they can possibly go while they're making these decisions they normally would make, but they have to, and handling the puck and receiving passes, all the things they would normally do, but they have to do it at an uncomfortably fast pace. That's what I call overspeed. Overspeed means you're practicing at an uncomfortably fast pace.
So is that where you talk to your guys about raising their own comfort zone?
So from every practice, well, first of all, let's just see what a normal 15-year-old kid does during the day. If he's got 1 hour of practice, there are 23 hours. Let's forget the sleep part. There's many hours where he's practicing slowness. See, I'm a neurophysiologist. I believe in the fact of neurophysiology that you become what you repeat most often. It's kind of a law of neurophysiology, but nobody refers to those kind of words in the field. You become what you repeat most often. Well, for 23 hours then, they're repeating slowness as they walk around school and so on. Now let's take the typical practice, the normal practice, a very good one. A lot of the practice, the coach is explaining the drill. They're not practicing overspeed, of course. They're learning what the drill's about. When they do the drill, they're doing it at a comfortably fast pace, because that'll satisfy the coach, since the skills all work. That is, when they're comfortable, they can make the pass, they can receive the passes, they can make the decisions if they're competing against defensemen. They can make decisions because they're at a comfortably, if the coach said to do it fast, they're at a comfortably fast pace. But that doesn't prepare them to do it at a faster pace at the end of the season, or for 15-year-olds, it doesn't prepare them to make the 16-year-old team, because that pace is going to be faster. For every kid to prepare to play at a higher level, they have to practice uncomfortably fast sometime in their practices. Well, no one does, so that's what I do in the summer. The players I work with all know that the only thing we're going to do is work on skating faster, doing some of the harder things skating, like going around corners faster than comfortable. So these really good players that I work with will fall once in a while because it's uncomfortably fast. But the entire hour of our summer workouts is overspeed. So I give them the right amount of rest, but not any extra rest. Believe me, I have a watch on my glove, and it's just barely enough to recover so that they can do the next one at 100% top speed. That's what overspeed in the summer means. Would mean in the winter that part of your practice has to be, in my opinion, if you're preparing for the playoffs, has to be overspeed so that they know what it feels like to try and do it at an uncomfortably fast pace, so that eventually you're comfortable at that faster pace. The idea in 1980 was that by February, we would be comfortable executing all team skills, everything we did, at what was originally an uncomfortably fast pace, but by February, it's comfortable. We can do it. That's what he asked about. How can we train to play comfortably at the pace of the Soviets, even if we're not skillfully and in terms of experience, we're not quite at their level.
You mentioned that Coach Brooks referred to you as Cardiac. Can you give us a little bit of an insight as to how you got that nickname?
We can only imagine where that came from listening to what he's talking about, right?
The first team I worked with were the North Stars, and Gary Sargent, all-star defenseman from Bemidji, was the first one to call me Cardiac because we did off-ice training and on-ice training that made their heart beat a little bit faster than they were used to.
A little bit.
And I was always talking about cardiovascular fitness and whatever, and I think he took the term from that. But he called me Cardiac, and so everybody on the North Stars did, and Herb Brookls started, because I was also working, not helping Herb Brookls, but I was testing and talking with him about training. And so I would go back to the University of Minnesota practices, and he would call me Cardiac. So pretty soon everybody did.
We're going to give a quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors. Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine has been committed to the healthcare needs of patients in Western Wisconsin since 1954. The orthopedic surgeons and athletic trainers serve many area schools. Their success and reputation as an outstanding orthopedic clinic can be attributed to the teamwork of friendly, knowledgeable physicians and staff. And Mogi and I are trying to keep them in business alone with all of our new parts and so forth. And Computer Recovery Associates specialize in removing, monetizing, and recycling computer hardware from large data centers. Whether you're looking to relocate, repurpose, sell, or recycle, Computer Recovery Associates can help at computerrecoveryassociates.com. Mogi.
So Cardiac, if I may call you that.
Of course.
What does a typical overspeed off-ice training session look like, and what does a typical on-ice overspeed training session look like?
Well, on ice, I mentioned briefly, but on ice, we start in the summer, we start with skating, learning to accelerate straight ahead. Doesn't take long. The guys I work with are all great skaters to start with, but I don't teach how to skate, except if what they're doing from prior training or teaching of some power skating instructors, if what they're doing fights physics, then I help them change. So, as an example, accelerating from a standstill, we can copy Usain Bolt. He leans way forward. It's not easy for a guy 6'5" to be the fastest accelerator in the world. And he is. He comes out of the blocks. He's at least every bit as fast as the other top sprinters in the world. And he's 6'5". That's not easy if he isn't using physics correctly. So he leans way, way forward, more than a 45-degree angle. His body's in a straight line, so the force goes through his body. If he was bent at the waist, the force wouldn't go through his body, and therefore he's fighting physics. Very simple. On corners, the usual mistake, even the very top skaters in the NHL or in our group, if they have trouble on corners, it's that they lean forward too much. It's just the opposite. When you go around corners, the physics is you're accelerating toward the center of the circle. You're not accelerating forward. You're accelerating toward the center of the circle. Acceleration means change of your velocity. If you're changing your speed from straight ahead to around the corner, your acceleration is toward the center. You can't do that. Anybody can just try to do it incorrectly by leaning way forward out on your toes and try and jump sideways, try and make force to the side. You can't do it. But if you sit back like you're doing squats in the weight room, if you sit back with your butt behind your heels, now you can jump to the side, meaning you can apply force to the side, which on the ice is applying force to the center of the circle. So it's just the opposite of accelerating straight ahead. Your body posture, position has to be different. And very elite skaters have trouble with both because they haven't practiced the physics of it. It's not like a big, huge explanation to the players. It's just when they have trouble, if, for example, when they're trying to accelerate, if they're too upright, their feet are it looks like they're kind of running in place. Their feet might be really quick, but they're not going anywhere. This is really good skaters. You have to lean forward in order to get acceleration force straight ahead. And many of them, when we start skating corners at 100% over, an uncomfortably fast pace, which we do, they'll either fall or learn how to do it with better posture. And then there's three things about the skating. The last is, once you've accelerated 4, 5, 6 strides, now how do you maintain higher speed without using super quick feet? The best skaters are the ones who do it best. They look more like speed skaters than hockey players. They have really wide strides. I call it tacking, which comes from a sailboat. We know that a sailboat can skate or can travel toward a target that is straight upwind. Let's just say the wind is going 20 miles an hour. They have to tack, and when they do, they can move at speeds, like, for example, let's say it's a 20-mile-an-hour wind. Those racing sailboats, they tack at speeds of like 50 miles an hour, and they're going somewhat into the wind. So it's a question of which direction they choose to tack and what direction their sail is adjusted to the wind. Computers used to do that, but in those racing sailboats now, the skipper used to do it, but now computers adjust the thing. Well, when great skaters are going at high speed straight ahead, it's their body, their neuromuscular system, which is deciding what angle to have their skate at when they push to the side. Because you couldn't push to the side with your blade perpendicular to the way you're pushing, otherwise you just move sideways. So you have to push to the side with your skate at some non-perpendicular angle to the direction you're pushing. And our neuromuscular computer in our body does it better for the faster skaters than it does for the weaker skaters.
So question on that. I've been watching games for a long time. It seems like now when guys they have the puck and they're heading down into the offensive zone, to maintain that speed, they're doing crossovers both ways in a straight line. Is that kind of what you're talking about here a little bit? Or
that's not what I'm talking about, but that is true. Okay. I don't think you can skate as fast that way as you can pushing to the side, tacking, in other words.
Okay. Yep.
If you could, then speed skaters would do it,
Sure. Yep.
right?
Okay. Yep. Good point.
But the ones who, like Connor McDavid, who can perhaps skate almost as fast that way as when he's skating by tacking, by pushing to the side, they're much better at maintaining their speed as they're doing crossover, which of course is an advantage for McDavid because the defensemen are, it's very unsettling to have this fast guy coming down, weaving as he's coming towards you. So it's a good thing to practice, and we practice that too. But the answer is to go straight ahead as fast as you can go. You have to push harder to the side than most people. Even the best skaters in our group, two of which are going to be NHLers in a couple years because they're first-round draft choices. They're great, great skaters now. They're learning for the first time, really, one of them. The other was a beautiful skater all along. The first, not such a beautiful skater, but he's learning to tack better. He's pushing, his stride's much wider, and therefore he's much faster straight ahead.
You've mentioned players, including some first-round draft choices. Are you working with all levels of players from the NHL down to high school, or are you primarily focused on a select group right now?
I don't focus on who I train. I just show up at the rink, and whoever comes the first day is probably the group I'm going to have for the summer. The group I have are kids. I'll have to say, when I use the word kids, I'm talking about anybody under Social Security age. So,
Not us, JC.
Can you give us some names of some of the players that you're working with?
We're here at Dave Snuggerud's school. His son, Jim, I've worked with him for 5-6 years. So he's one. The other first-round draft pick, I'm not sure I should go through everybody's name because if I differentiate first-round draft picks from others, I would feel that's not necessarily fair. So everybody in our group this year happens to be a high school player that's already committed to a Division I school, or a really good Division I player already in college. And this is maybe the second year I haven't had any pros because those guys, Jordan Leopold, Paul Martin, and on, have retired. But traditionally it's been NHLers down into high school. But I haven't worked with, there's one or two Bantams in our group. I don't care if they're good or not. It has nothing to do with whether it's, the only question is, will they work hard enough to go faster than comfortable? That's not easy for a Bantam-age kid to do when everybody else out there is a college or, an elite player. And it's not easy for elite players to be on the ice with a young player because he might be judged for his effort to go as fast as possible. So as it turns out, everybody does, or they're not in our group.
A couple more shout-outs to our sponsors. Dooley's Pub has been Eau Claire's home for hockey and all sports fans since 2005. Dooley's Pub is a proud booster of the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and local high schools. Dooley's is located on historic Water Street, providing excellent food and service. And also Kelly Heating and Electric, dedicating to serving their customers' heating and electrical needs efficiently. They have been named one of Bryant's Medal of Excellence winners. They provide expert advice from a friendly staff that can provide you with the knowledge you need to make the best decisions on your next electrical, heating, or air conditioning project.
We were talking before we turned the mics on, and it's obvious that Herb Brookls has had a lot of faith in you because not only did you follow him from the university, but also to the Olympics and then to pro. And you gave us a quote that he said about miracles. Would you share that with our listeners?
Yeah, it's my favorite of all the things he said, publicly or privately. Publicly, toward the end of his life, one of the things he said most often when he's talking to a group of coaches is, we are the temporary caretakers of this game. And we have to ask ourselves all the time, are we leaving the game better than we found it? I have my doubts that the answer today would be yes. If we maintain the same game as before, we're doing well. The most important thing he said privately was, this is right after the Olympics and everybody's talking about the miracle on ice, and he said, there are no miracles in sports. There's only the final score on our preparation.
That has some deep insight into it, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And you said he had unique ways of not only preparing himself, but preparing the team and the opposite team.
And coaches.
And coaches, yes, absolutely. And can you care to share any of those stories about how he would prepare himself? You cited a situation with a Zamboni driver or other opportunities that he had to fire himself up.
First of all, he prepared for talking between periods to the team, before the game, anytime he practices, anytime he had a chance, he prepared. It wasn't always spontaneous, but he had thousands of options. So to that extent, it was sort of spontaneous which option he might choose. But he prepared by, whenever he'd have a thought about things he might want to say to the team, he'd put it down on 3x5 note cards. And he had tons of those note cards. Now that sounds like it could get pretty unemotional. So to prepare himself to be emotional when he wanted to speak to the team emotionally, he may start a fight with the Zamboni driver over the quality of the ice, and then he'd run in and talk to the team when he was emotional. After the game, he'd get out the bottle of wine that he brought, or whiskey or whatever it was, and give to the Zamboni driver and say, "Hey, I was just kidding. Forget it." But he prepared everybody in that way. The opposing coach, which he did with Tikhonov in the 1980 Olympics, by making a point of nodding to him. They couldn't. Neither one of them could speak the other's language, but nodding to him with whatever facial expression he might want to use that particular time, but nodding to him every time you saw him as they passed in the hallway and so on. And so he got Tikhonov thinking about Herb Brookls rather than coaching the game. And during the game, when things were happening, not just goals, but things were happening that surprised Tikhonov because the U.S. team was doing things that he didn't expect, he often looked down at Herbie, and Herbie looked back at him, winked or whatever, to let him know that this is a fight between the two of them, which Herb didn't think it was, but maybe Tikhonov got thinking that. He prepared the fans, because like when the Gophers would go down and play in Wisconsin, he wanted the fans to be rabid and hate Herb Brookls and express it and whatever. He wanted that environment. And then he would sometimes prepare the opposing team, as he did with the Philadelphia Flyers each year when he was in New York. We played them the first round of the playoffs, and so one time on a Sunday afternoon, he said, "Jack, we had finished our regular season." He said, "Cardiac, not Jack." Cardiac, the Flyers are playing their last game tonight, would you want to drive down and watch? And we did. And as he watched the game, he was just sickened by the fact that the defensemen for the Flyers couldn't concentrate on hockey at the same time they were focused on beating the tar out of the other team. They were just thugs. And we went into the press room, and he said that when one of the media asked him, what are you going to do about the Flyer defensemen? Because they had this reputation that nobody wanted to play against them. And he says, oh, I thought I'd toss some dog bones on the ice and distract them. So it was all over the papers. The result was, even though they finished first in the division and we finished fourth, the result was we eliminated them. It was 3 games out of 5. We eliminated them 3 straight games every year for the 4 years Herb was there because they beat themselves with penalties.
Coach, earlier we were talking a little bit about the players that you work with currently here over the summer. So how does word get out about working with you?
Well, it doesn't get out very far. These are the same kids I had last year, and then now some of their friends have joined. There's no question everybody skates better at the end of the summer. Not that I instruct, it's just that we rehearse over and over and over how to do it. That's all I do. I'm not an instructor at all. I keep track of the work-rest intervals, and so that every work interval is not too long, and every rest interval is long enough, but not so long that by the end of the hour, it's really an endurance workout. This is what I tell every team I work with. There's no one drill which by itself would be called an endurance skating drill. It's the sum of all of them in the entire practice.
So thinking about as a young player, I put away my stuff for at the end of the season, and now I want to start ramping up my summer program. How much time do you think as a young player should they be putting into working on their skills, working on their strengths, and working on their cardiovascular fitness?
All of those are really good questions. And I guess I would say the answer is it almost doesn't matter what I think is best during that period of time. They're going to do whatever some guru is charging them to do. So it's become a suburban sport, of course, because preparation in the minds of hockey people today means find the most expensive guru who can teach skills, who can train your body, whatever, but pay, and the more you pay, the more you get, which is why I never charge. Because if I did, I'd have too many people. All of them are going to be busy doing something during that period that you're talking about, and I don't really have much of a say in what they're going to do. Some ask about this or that, but I don't have much of a say. Now, specifically, because we do train as a group after the skating, we work out. And the training is 100% geared toward helping them skate faster. In other words, it's developmental training. Developmental training for adolescent athletes has been given the least information available to hockey, the least information, because most strength conditioning and endurance instructors work with people that will pay a lot of money. So they try to work for pro teams. That's their first choice. After that, they would work for a college team if they could. That's their second choice, because there's more money there. And so over the many years that I've been interested in this topic, I've never found anyone who really uses science to help develop skating speed and efficiency, meaning it works with physics, in a way that I think is very rational.
So
what I mean by that is that adolescence, which we know now from neuroscientists, adolescence really extends into the early 20s. In other words, our nervous system is learning just as much at that, say at 20 years old as at 13 or 14 years old, right after puberty, for boys, a little bit earlier for girls. So I've always seen that players learn and improve fastest when they're most motivated. The players I work with in those years are all motivated, and they're all improving fast. And when they have to make a big jump, like from high school to juniors or juniors to college, they improve most.
Looking back at the players that you've helped develop, is there one that stands out in your mind that you started out with this young individual and because of your system leaps and bounds and he or she is now playing D1 or pro hockey?
No, there's not one, but there are many. It starts way back. For example, George McPhee, the GM who just won the Stanley Cup for, I worked with him many years ago. One time I was on the ice recently with Tyler Nanny in an overspeed thing. And I don't say much during overspeed practice because I got to watch the rest interval, and I don't explain the next drill very well. It's okay if they're a little confused. The guys in front of the line usually know what to do, but if they don't go exactly where I say, say I outlined, or I said they should do a figure eight or something, and they do a circle, I don't care as long as they do it fast, and everybody else does the same thing, so it's safe. So I don't talk much. But I said, Tyler, you're the third generation of nannies that I've done this with. Not that I'm older than Lou. I don't claim that. But I started doing it in the summer when a bunch of guys, including Lou, were going to try out for the Olympic team, and they wanted to get in shape. So I ran that. And then his son, Marty, at the University of Minnesota, and then finally Tanner. I don't think there's a lot of instructors out there that have done 3 generations of the same family. But way back, I mentioned George McPhee, was a Hobey Baker winner, and I was working for the Rangers. We drafted him, and he decided to come up and train all summer because he didn't think his skating was good enough now that he was making the step to the NHL. And so he stayed up here with us the whole summer. So he's one of the first that I would say eventually played in the NHL. And then at that same period, there's several others because I was working for the Rangers, and they came up to Brainerd to train, and Brian Leach among them certainly made it. He was an NHL All-Star, Hall of Famer, I mean. And then on and on. There's been different generations, and I couldn't mention one of any of those groups. Everybody improves, even the ones in our group today. It's a very elite group, simply because they're friends of the other guys who were there last year or whatever. And every one of the high school kids is already committed to a college scholarship, and it has excellent college players in it as well.
So, Jack, your main emphasis right now is the physiological development of adolescent athletes. And you also wrote the book Overspeed Skill Training for Hockey. Would you like to see more associations, more of these exercise gurus incorporate more of your techniques and theories in their training of these athletes?
Of course I would, but I've been highly unsuccessful in the 50 years I've preached this, 40 years, because after the Olympics, people would ask me to talk to groups and coaches, groups of coaches, and they seemed very interested, and then they went back and did the same thing they've always done. So I've been unsuccessful at. There are a few former players that I worked with who now run programs somewhat like it, but not very many. Brett Strout and Rob Stauber won the women's gold medal in 2018, and they did nothing but overspeed training on ice. Herb Brookls did nothing but overspeed training on ice, and as a result, I shouldn't say as a result, but they both won gold medals. So whether the word gets out or not, honestly, I don't even care anymore because I've been unsuccessful at getting the word out. But what I care about, really what makes me nervous all summer, is that I can still do a good job with these guys who have such high expectations from their effort that I may run a week hour of overspeed skating. It may not work well, so I get nervous, just as nervous as I would have 50 years ago about playing in a golf tournament, let's say. I get nervous that I might screw up. So that's what motivates me. And it's fun to have elite players, but I don't care as long as they all work hard. Let me just say about the dryland training real quickly. I guess I can't say it quickly. I don't know if that's okay. I don't
Take as long as you need.
They're here
Coach.
to listen to you, not us.
Okay. But we do it every day. Most of the group that skates with us, some go to other trainers, but many of them we come right here to Breakaway Academy and train off ice. And do we train differently? Absolutely. I believe if you're training young kids, by that I mean adolescent age, you have to ask the question first about the training. What are the nerves remembering from all these repetitions we're doing? Now that should be asked in every training program for athletes that are in sports that require speed or power. That question should be asked first before you plan what you're going to do. Because if you do it, if your first question is, what is the cardiovascular system going to get out of these repetitions? And what's going to happen to the muscles in this strength training program? If that's your first question when you're planning, then a lot of what you do is going to train slowness. We have to remember repetitions don't make things perfect, they make things permanent. That's the law of neuroscience. What we repeat often is what we're going to become. That is really true of more true of adolescent athletes than, say, a 25, 26, 27-year-old pro. They're not going to change their habits of skating from skating stops and starts too long and skating incorrectly. It's not going to change their habits. But with a 16-year-old, the 19-year-old, if they skate slowly during your skating practice, they're practicing slowness. If everything they do off ice is slow, like, for example, if they jog around the lake for cardiovascular fitness, they're training slowness. If all they do is lift weights, they're moving the bar, slowly, and they're moving their body hardly at all, they're not training quickness. So what we do, because we do lift sometimes fairly heavy weights, because it's a pretty elite older group, we do lift heavy hex bar squats because they're safer than back squats. But we do other lifts that are slow. But between every set, we do something that's really fast. Short sprint or jumps, one-legged jumps or two-legged jumps. We do between every set. Then we might go back to the slower strength exercise, and then we do, because I don't want for a whole hour of dryland training the repetitions to all be slow. And we can't overload the neuromuscular system enough with just sprinting and jumping, I think. Maybe you can, because they certainly have done it for thousands of years before us. Jesse Owens did. He did okay.
Yeah, he sure did.
So that would be the difference in a strength, what people would call a strength exercise in dryland training after skating. And for endurance, that's what we do. Now, we have found recently, like in the last 15 years or so, a physiological phenomenon that we didn't know 20 years ago or forever before that, that when we're training fast twitch muscle fibers, which are the kind that have to be used when we're doing something super fast or super heavy, fast twitch muscle fibers they're called, as opposed to slow twitch ones, which people use when they're jogging or walking for endurance. Well, in hockey, we have to train both, because we're going to use them both in games. And so we have to train fast twitch fibers with as much. The only way that the fast twitch fibers are recruited is if our effort is near maximum. So how does that add up to endurance training, which is going to affect the cardiovascular system as well, actually better than if we did long, slow distances? We have to do intervals off ice. We have to have enough rest in between so that everyone's maximum, so that we are involving fast twitch fibers. But during the recovery interval, those fast twitch fibers have to learn how to provide energy to the body. ATP is the term most people use, but how to provide energy to the body rather than just dump the lactic acid into the blood, which is what we thought happened before. Now we've learned in the last 15 years that by doing this interval training, the fast twitch fibers, I'm just going to use a couple technical terms. I hope they don't destroy the whole concept, but fast twitch fibers from interval training will have more mitochondria, which are the sites of producing energy to the body. We didn't used to think that fast twitch fibers had any mitochondria. Now we know that from interval training, intense interval training, they increase the number and volume of the mitochondria in the fast twitch fibers, so they are much more efficient during recovery periods at providing energy efficiently to the body. Are there more recovery intervals in hockey than other sports? You think of this. This is the only way to gain endurance for, in my opinion, tennis and football. That is, the games are work, rest, work, rest, work, rest. Tennis, football, those rest intervals are very obvious. In hockey, some of the rest intervals are very obvious, that we sit on the bench to recover, and we also have 2 intermissions rather than 1. There's a lot of recovery there. But we have found, biomechanists have found, that during a game, during the most intense games, we are alternating between acceleration and deceleration, deceleration, changing directions is a acceleration. There's short periods like 1, 2, or 3 seconds of acceleration and 1, 2, or 3 seconds of deceleration. During deceleration, when we're on the ice, because there's no friction, we're recovering. Whereas on the soccer pitch, they call it, on the soccer field, deceleration takes a lot of energy because there's friction. So there's much more recovery periods in hockey than we know. Therefore, high intense intervals in practice and training prepares us for in games when we accelerate, decelerate. It prepares the fast twitch fibers, which we're using during the game, to help us recover, which we didn't know before.
So I just want to give a little shout out to all our young players that are listening to this, their parents that are listening to this, and coaches that are listening to this. You're listening to an acclaimed and noted exercise physiologist talking about how to get better, how to get faster. Take a little money, invest in the book, Overspeed Skill Training for Hockey, apply those principles, and watch your players get better.
I would have to agree, Moog. And let's talk about real quickly. I know you don't want to focus this on you, Cardiac, but in 2019, you were awarded the Lester Patrick Award by the NHL, given annually to a person for outstanding service to hockey in the United States. What does that award mean to you?
Nothing, honestly. I believe the award could have gone to any one of thousands of volunteers just like myself. I got it because I'm old. Like that's what they do with awards. They give it to old guys. Now, other people on the list, were great players, great coaches, whatever. But I was the first physiologist, first volunteer coach. That's why they gave me the award, and they did it because I'm old.
Okay, well then I've got one more question for you. We're going to deviate from that. We had a little bit of a discussion earlier that when Herb Brookls took you on to the 80 Olympic team, he was going to give you 45 minutes of time with the players after practice. Give us a little insight to your first contact with him when that first 45 minutes was coming up.
Well, he wanted me to do overspeed training the last 45 minutes of the first practice. And I had worked with pro teams before and knew that they weren't in good enough shape to start on the first day with overspeed skating or they'd pull groin muscles. And I kept arguing. I said, I think we shouldn't do it that way. And he said, no, we have to do it. Otherwise, they're going to lose faith in the word overspeed. And he said, the ones that pull their groins, that's just too bad. They'll have to sit out till they recover. And so our plan was that I was going to, first of all, I explained to the players what it meant, that I was going to time the intervals and they were going to have enough rest to do everything at 100% top speed. They could trust that I wasn't going to just, skate them hard the first couple intervals and then cheat on the rest interval and not give them enough rest. They believed in it. We talked about it before we went on the ice. Now, this was super important to Herb because he's coming into the league with a bunch of new concepts. First of all, we had several Scandinavians, Swedes and Finns on the team, and then we had several from the 1980 Olympic team, several Americans. So it was the first team in the NHL to have a substantial number of non-Canadians. There's more Canadians than the rest of them put together. Of course, maybe 60% of the team was Canadians, but this was new. And trust me, it was all over the New York papers. This is new. Besides that, Herb was going to use his version of an American, Russian, American, European hybrid style of play. That is, we weren't just going to go straight north and south. We were going to weave. We're going to throw the puck back to our D, regroup, do things that no other team was doing. And so, he's thinking outside the box here, and it's all over the press that that's what we're doing. So his first practice as a guy who had only coached in college before was watched by, you couldn't get more media in the arena that day to watch his first practice. And it's really one of the first practices where an assistant coach is going to run a substantial part of it. And so I was nervous. Like, what am I going to do if some of the leaders on the team just don't go 100% as fast as they could? If no one goes fast enough around the corner that they might fall, what am I going to do? Am I going to get angry and cause a problem on Herb Brookls' team? No, of course not. They're just going to do what they do. That's why I talked to him beforehand. Well, so I'm standing just outside the rink watching the regular practice, the first part of practice, and then with 45 minutes left, I started on the ice, and Herb, of course, is running a drill, and he's looking away from me, not away, but perpendicular. He's looking down to the end of the rink, and I'm coming in from the side. And as I approach him, he says, "What are you doing?" And it's quiet for a while. And I said, "I'm taking over. There's 45 minutes left." And Herb says, "Well, don't screw up." I could probably use other language, but it had the same effect no matter what. When he said that, I was already nervous. I could hardly stand up. I'm wondering how this is going to go. And then he says, "Don't screw up." And then he skates off the ice. So I'm just scared to death. But it went great. The leaders on the team loved it. And the rest of the year, they went as hard as they could, as fast as they could during all overspeed drills.
Cardiac, this has been a very insightful conversation. Your knowledge is unprecedented, and you have blazed a trail with the individuals that you have come in contact with, and Mogi and I appreciate what you are doing and what you've done for the game of hockey.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your thoughts. It means a lot to me. And I hope for the future of hockey that more people who have tasted the overspeed will try it with young kids. The truth is, the only way to prepare a team for the fastest games of the year, which are going to be in the playoffs, is to have some overspeed in a couple practices a week. Doesn't have to be the whole practice as it was with the 1980 team or the 2018 women's team. Doesn't have to be the whole practice, but it better be a substantial part of your preparation, or players will not be faster when they step up to a higher level.
Thank you, sir. And folks, please remember to say hi to our sponsors when you drop in on them. Do us a favor, give us a rating and a shout out on your social media platforms. Helps us stay in the game. Mogi?
And a big thanks to our guest, probably one of the most accomplished and humble guests we've ever had, Jack Blatherwick, as well as you, our audience. Please remember our sponsors, Computer Recovery Associates, Dooley's Pub, Kelly Heating and Electric, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, and our good buddy, Sleepy, John Sleep. Follow us on your favorite social media platforms as well as YouTube. And remember, folks, until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay on your inside edges.